Krsna,
His Divine Grace,
A.C.
Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Guru Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki, Sri Krishna Balaram Ki, Sri Radha Govinda Ki, Sri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Gauri Ki, Sankirtan Yajna Ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to this noble devotees, all glories to this noble devotees, all glories to this noble devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Can I just ask one cultural question? Yes. When you say en Creole, glories to this noble devotees, what do you say? Toute gloire au devant assemblée. I thought en français it's rassemblé. No. Assemblée. Toute gloire au devant assemblée. Toute gloire au devant. Step by step. Devotees, Hare Krishna. Well, anyway, lo propose on grace. Excuse me what to do. I'm not reading a particular class in Creole, or even in French. All right, so let us carry on. So we are reading this morning from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila chapter 6, the liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And this is now verse 172, which I already read through a bit earlier. And it seems to me, anyway, we'll see how it goes, but I might also want to read verse 173. Would that be acceptable or? Acceptable. If you don't want to break the rules or upset the flow of things. So anyway, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, because I read through, and if you've been following it, I guess it's every Sunday, is it? Yeah. If you've been following it, you would know it is a little complicated part of Chaitanya Charitamrita, analyzing the philosophy of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya is a complicated person. All right, anyway, let us see how we do. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Charitamrita Manjali, chapter 6, the liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, verse 172. Vyasa Branta Bali Sutre Dosha Diya Vivarta Vada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya Vyasa Branta Balise Sutra Dosha Diya Vivartavada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya Vyasabranti Balise Sutre Dosha Diya Vivartavada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya Vyasabranta Balise Sutre Dosha Diya Vivartavada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya Vyasabranta Balise Sutre Dosha Diya Vivartavada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya Please.
Sabranta Balise Sutre Dosha Diya Vivartavada Stapyache Kalpana Kariya
Branta, mistaken, Bali, saying, say that, Sutra, in the Vedanta Sutra, dosha, fault, diya, accusing, Vivartavada, the theory of illusion, Stapyache, has established, Kalpana, imagination, Kariya, doing. Translation. Shankaracharya states that the theory of transformation presented in the Vedanta Sutra implies that the absolute truth itself is transformed. In this way, the Mayavadi philosophers denigrate Srila Vyasadeva by accusing him of error. They thus find fault in the Vedanta Sutra and misinterpret it to try to establish the theory of illusion. This is pretty deep stuff. Okay, so purport by Srila Prabhupada. The first verse of the Brahma Sutra is Atato Brahma Jigyasa, which means we must now inquire into the absolute truth. The second verse immediately answers Janma Yasya Yataha, which means the absolute truth is the original source of everything. Janma Yasya Yataha does not suggest that the original person has been transformed. Rather, it clearly indicates that he produces this cosmic manifestation through his inconceivable energy. This is also clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 8, where Lord Krishna says, Mata Sarvam Pravartate, which means, from me, everything emanates. This is also confirmed in the Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1. Yatova imani bhutani jayante, which means the supreme absolute truth is that from which everything is born. Similarly, in the Mundaka Upanishad 1.1.7, it is stated, Yatorana nabi srijate grinate cha, which means the Lord creates and destroys the cosmic manifestation as a spider creates a web and draws it back within itself. All of these Vedic statements indicate the transformation of the Lord's energy, not of the Lord himself. Transformation of the Lord's energy is called Parinama Vada. However, being very anxious to protect Srila Vyasadeva from criticism, Shankaracharya became a pseudo-gentleman and put forward his theory of illusion, Vivartavada. Shankaracharya concocted this meaning of Parinamavad, and by word a jugglery, he endeavored very hard to establish Parinamvad as Vivartavad. Hare Krishna. Interesting. Very interesting, actually. That one has to think and focus, otherwise it may end up just sort of going over our heads or around our heads or maybe nowhere near our heads. Anyway, let me just read the verse again. Vyasabranta Bali say, Sutre dosha diya, Vivartavada stapiyanche, Kalpana kariya. Shankaracharya states that the theory of transformation presented in the Vedanta Sutra implies that the absolute truth itself is transformed. In this way, the Mayavadi philosophers denigrate. Denigrate means criticize. They denigrate Srila Vyasadeva by accusing him of error. They thus find fault in the Vedanta Sutra and misinterpret it to try to establish the theory of illusion. Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krsna Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Mastricharishita Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Vajka Trubis Chapi Prasindu Yevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So devotees. Well, it's really nice that you're going through Chaitanya Charitamrita on Sundays. It's a really good thing to do. Such an important literature. And just like we have Bhagavata classes, obviously, and we have Bhagavad Gita classes often. I remember back in the old days, every night we would have a Bhagavad Gita class. Yeah, it's not really, well, I don't know, maybe you do it here, but it's not so common as far as I've observed nowadays. Yeah, so these are our main scriptures, so it's very good to have specific focused discussions systematically from beginning to end. So it's great that you're doing a good Chaitanya Charitamrita. And, you know, it might sound a little incomprehensible or just difficult to really get clearly within your mind, but it is possible. It is possible. And we should do it. Actually, here Lord Chaitanya is discussing the philosophy of Shankaracharya with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and he's basically, you could say, sort of like converting him into a devotee, or maybe you could say like that, or at the very least he's really clarifying, because there are different descriptions of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the main biography of Lord Chaitanya after all, and the only biography Prabhupada But if you look at Chaitanya Bhagavat, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta translated and commented on, there Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is presented as not like a really staunch Vaishnava, but something like a Vaishnava, but not a clearly minded Vaishnava who really understands what's what in Krishna consciousness. And so Lord Chaitanya helps him, and then he accepts Lord Chaitanya as spiritual master. So, Shankaracharya, for very good reason, has a bad reputation, you could say, amongst the devotees for promoting impersonalism, specifically Mayavad. There are two forms of impersonalism. One is Mayavad, and one is called Brahmavad. And there are clear distinctions between the two. We know that Shukadeva Goswami, the four commands, they're presented as being in the Bhagavatam, they presented as being impersonalists, having been before impersonalists, but then they, in different ways, like the four Kumars, Narada Muni preached to them. Well, they were Brahmavadis. Brahmavadi and Shukadeva. Brahmavadi means one who accepts Brahman. Everything is Brahman. A Mayavadi, Maya, of course, we're all familiar with Maya, illusion. So Mayavad is different in that their slogan, the slogan basically of the Brahmavadis is Sarvam Kal Vidam Brahma. You may have heard that shloka. It's from Vedanta Sutra. You may have heard that before. Sarvam Kal Idam Brahma. Sarvam, everything is Brahman. Everything is Brahman. Whereas the Mayavadis, their sort of slogan or, basic verse is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mitya. Brahman is truth, that this world is false, in the sense that in all the different manifestations in this world, like us, living beings in the embodied state, and this building and the planet and just all the things, all the manifestations of matter, that they don't really exist. They don't really exist. But rather, it's all one. It's all one. That concept comes from the Mayavadis, that none of us exist. And therefore, Mayavad is like a close relative of Buddhism, which says that it's called, Prabhupada calls, it's generally called Shunyavad. Shunya meaning nothing, Vad meaning knowledge, knowledge of nothing. Nothing exists. If anything appears to exist, it's your mistake, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, you don't exist. The philosophy of Buddhism doesn't exist. Nothing exists, because it's Shunyavad. So Mayavad is very close in that everything we see, everything is Brahman. It exists. That's the good news, so to speak. Everything exists, but not in the way we see it. It's actually Brahman. It's all one. So sitting here in the class, none of us are sitting here. and the deities are not here, and so on and so forth. And we could get into a whole thing. It's quite a subject. But basically, it's only Brahman. There's just this oneness, this spiritual energy everywhere. And that's it. Whereas Brahmavad accepts that everything does exist, but it is Brahman. And so when the four commands were preached to by Narada Muni about Krishna, then they thought, wow, this Krishna sounds like really nice Brahman. As Krishna, not as like nothing or just energy, but as Krishna, it sounds like really nice Brahman. So therefore they went to Vaikuntha to meet him. And they met him. And just before they met him, they smelt the fragrance of the tulsi on his lotus feet, which was just, on the breeze. It was being just gently blown in front of him before he came. And they smelt this tulsi, and then they became personalists. That he is actually a form of the absolute truth. So they went from being Brahmavadis to devotees, four commands. Anyway, Shankaracharya, as we know, Shankaracharya, even though he is the Acharya of the Mayavad philosophy, the whole Mayavadi Sampradaya, which is not small. It's really not small, it's big in India. So Shankaracharya, he is Lord Shiva, and he came to help people become at least partially returned to the Vedic tradition from the Buddhist tradition, which is not Vedic. In fact, it's anti-Vedic. Many years ago, I think it was 94 even. It was 94. I made a trip to Russia, and I went all over, and even way out in eastern Siberia, which was part of Mongolia, and so that at least half the population, they're Mongolian-type people, and they're Buddhists. There's several million of them, and they're Buddhists. And this one devotee, the leading devotee, took me to what is the headquarters of Buddhism in Russia. And I met the head of Buddhism in Russia. And he was a disciple of the Dalai Lama. And so we're talking about this and that. And I mentioned Shankaracharya, and he got all upset. I mean, not really upset, but you could see he didn't like Shankaracharya. Because Shankaracharya really had like a devastating effect on Buddhism in India, and India is the home of Buddhism. I mean, Buddhism in India just reduced drastically. You can hardly find it, although you find it in other countries, in the vicinity. But Shankaracharya, he was only in India. Yeah, so they don't like him. So Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is the presiding deity of the mode of ignorance. So the philosophy of Shankaracharya is like a complete manifestation of the mode of ignorance. And therefore it's said that unless you, or even if you, are a Mahabhagavat, really advanced devotee. Of course, there are different levels of Mahabhagavat, but even lower level Mahabhagavats means they're already liberated souls in Krishna consciousness, but not necessarily on like the highest levels, but that even such a person may fall down by hearing the philosophy of Shankaracharya. So you might wonder, what are we doing here, examining the philosophy of Shankaracharya a little bit? And it's really complicated, but these points being made here, they're really like foundational points in the philosophy of Shankaracharya. But they're a bit complicated, talking about things which, we do talk about, but they're more complicated parts of Krishna consciousness. You can say it's all what's being discussed here, what we read about in the verse itself, in the purport. These are different elements, different parts of the picture of Achintya Bhed Abhed Tattva, really. Yeah, or at least connected to it. And so the thing is, the point that Lord Chaitanya is making in the verse itself is that Vyasadeva, when he presented the Vedanta Sutra, he presented that what is reality, I mean, you could say in a basic sense, what is reality? And the name of the philosophy is Parinam Vad. Vad meaning knowledge, and Parinam means transformation. So, if you were here, I guess it was last week, and the previous verse was read, then it's good actually, because it gives a good example to illustrate the principle of how transformation works. What is being transformed? So, Lord Chaitanya said, this is the previous verse, 171, the touchstone, after touching iron, produces volumes of gold without the touchstone being transformed. The iron is transformed. The touchstone is not transformed. So, and then he goes on, similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests himself as the cosmic manifestation by his inconceivable potency, but he remains unchanged. This is the point. That transformation is going on in reality, the world, the universe. It's all going on the basis of transformation, but you've got to be careful to understand what's being transformed and what isn't. And what isn't being transformed is the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord. What is being transformed is his energy. This is the point. But, as Prabhupada says here, how does Prabhupada put it? being very anxious to protect Srila Vyasadeva from criticism, because he's the author of Vedanta Sutra, Shankaracharya became a pseudo-gentleman. You understand what that means, right? Like, he appears to be a gentleman, oh, very nice, but actually he's not. He's a bogus gentleman. He's actually a rascal. Yeah. But he's, acting in a certain way by saying that he made a mistake. Yeah. Well, at least the Mayavadis generally, they say Vyas, because this is a philosophy of Vyas, that the absolute truth remains the same, but the energies change. But the Mayavadis say that it all changes. Everything changes. Yeah, so they say Vyas made a mistake. So Shankaracharya then, he tries sort of to make an excuse by saying that it's not really Parinamvad, that the absolute truth remains as it is and the energy transforms. It's actually Vivartavard, that everything's being transformed. Anyway, I know it's complicated, and don't worry, I would say it's not crucial that you really... Well, you should get the basic idea at least, but you don't need to really so much understand what the Mayavadis say, because it's not really our business. Yeah, but we do need to know what is the Krishna conscious point. Anyway, Prabhupada, at the beginning of the purport, it's interesting and important. The first verse of Brahma Sutra is actually the invocation. It's actually the invocation of Vedanta Sutra. Means like setting the scene for Brahma before going into what is the message of Vedanta Sutra. So the first verse or the invocation is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. And the second verse is actually the first verse of the text, the explanation, is Janma Yasya Yataha. Yeah. So Atato Brahma Jigyasa, we must now inquire into the absolute truth. And then, Janma Yasya Yataha. What is the absolute truth? It is Janma Adi, the original source of birth, literally. The original source of everything. Yeah. That is the absolute, the essence of the absolute truth. And, I assume that you're all familiar enough with Srimad Bhagavatam to know this little sutra, Janma Yasya Yataha. You all know that. You know that. You've heard it before. You've heard it before. It's the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. Janma Yasya Yataha Itrates Charte. Itratas Chartesh Lavigyasvarat. Tene Brahma Vidaya Adikavaye Muryanti Yatsuraya Tejovari Redonyata Vinamayo Yatra Trisargo Visha Dhammasvena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Katya Satyam Param Dimani. That's the first verse. Good verse to memorize if you're into learning verses, because it's, wow, that's a really foundational verse. But the first thing is Janma Yasya Yataha. We must now inquire, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. we must now inquire into Brahma Jigyas, means the absolute truth. And so, okay, what is it? Jagadyasya Yataha. It's the source of birth, of everything. Of birth, or just like origin, of everything. And it's interesting, Atata Brahma Jigyasa, as a sutra itself, there's an analysis of it done by Srila Balaram Vijayabhushan, that what it's literally saying, it is saying, Atta, Atta. Atta, Atta becomes Atato. Yes. But Atato is not just one word, it's a compound. It's two words, or it's the same word repeated. Atta, Atta, Atta. But it becomes Atato because the second Atta, the last syllable changes when it meets the letter B. That's Sanskrit grammar. Sandhi. They're complex, I think fantastically complex laws of Sandhi. How the last letters or last syllables of words change when they meet certain letters or syllables in the next word. And they change sometimes too. Anyway, we won't get into that too much. But Atta, the A becomes O when the A meets a B in the next word. So it becomes Atato. It's actually Atta. And Atta, in that context, means thereafter. After certain things, Brahma Jigyas, we must inquire into Brahman, or the absolute truth. So Srila Balaram Vijayabhushan gives an analysis of what are these after what, thereafter, after something, and after another thing, after two things, we must inquire into Brahman, or the absolute truth. Are you still awake? Are you sure you're awake? Pinch yourself to make sure. I know it's a bit otherwise. But it's very interesting. Atta, after two things. So he analyzes, Srila Balaram Vijayabhushan. The first thing, after what, is after just gross materialism. Means no religion at all. It's just you, your senses, and the material world, and just go for it. Get into it. Get your senses into the world, and just enjoy life. Yes. Have a good time. So if you're in that state, you can't inquire into the absolute truth. Or you can't, or you just won't be inclined to, because you're just too much absorbed in souled enjoyment. Eat, drink, and be merry. Yeah. You know, I used to go to Russia when it was possible. And I was Russian, and I would occasionally mention this little sutra, English language sutra, eat, drink, and be merry. Haribol. So I would sometimes mention it from the translator, because I was being translated. He would translate it. And one day, because I was learning, so I was listening to what he said. And what he said was, eat, drink, and be married. And I suddenly realized, step-by-step learning the language. Wait a minute, that's not it. Eat, drink, and be merry. Whoa, be merry, yeah. Okay, anyway. So yeah, right, that's animal life. That's just animal life. When there's no religion of any sort, there's just you, your senses, and the sense objects, and that's life. Then that means you are well, in Sanskrit, Pashu. Purusha, human, Pashu, animal, a man animal. Yeah. An animal sort of superficially, because of the outward appearance of the body, just kind of disguised as a human, but actually you're an animal in terms of your life, what your life is all about. So, okay, atta. After that, you inquire into Brahman, the absolute truth. But no, there's another atato. Then, only then can we really inquire into the absolute truth. So he says the second atta refers to, thereafter, you've got to go beyond religious materialism. First of all, you've got to go beyond animal materialism. Then you've got to go beyond karma, actually, to be specific, or just, religious materialism, where your interest in life is the same thing. To enjoy, yes, to have a good, to get material facilities, eat, drink, and be merry by the grace of God. I have even devotees have told me that they've had experience with, in the Hindu community in South Africa, that, a lot of the Hindu people converted to being Christians because they feel they'll get more money and better jobs and all these types of things. Yeah. So they preach that become a Christian, you'll get a better job, and people then change and become like heavy Christians even. So it's materialism in the disguise of religion. Yeah, so Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan talks about this, that these people, the Karmakandiya people, or when Prabhupada first arrived in America, he went to one, seminary, like a religious university for training priests. And he was giving a class to these student priests. And Prabhupada somehow, if you know something about Christianity, you would know one of the most famous prayers is, give us this day our daily bread. Yes, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Anyway, I was brought up as a sort of a Christian. It's called the Lord's Prayer. But this famous part, which Prabhupada then quoted, was, give us this day our daily bread, God. And Prabhupada, in this class, Prabhupada says, what is this prayer? And Prabhupada said, religion is to develop love for God. But what is this prayer? This prayer is about love of bread. Yeah, love of bread. And God just becomes a facilitator for getting bread, but actually the point is the bread. And in Russia, I mentioned, they make really good bread. It's amazing. And particularly the black bread. They make this black bread, and I tell you what, if you're a bread fan, it's the best in the world. Yeah. So yeah, give me bread, particularly the black bread, please. Yeah, okay. So it's the same idea. Either you work hard to get money to get bread, or maybe you steal it in some cases, but otherwise, generally, you pray to God and you get your bread. Ostensibly, without having to work hard, by the grace of God. But it's the same bread. It's the same bread. And you eat it the same. It's just the same. It's just a different way of getting it. So therefore it's animal life. But it's not just gross animal life. Yeah, just exploiting the material nature. But it's animal life by the mercy of God. All the same things. Nice house, I prayed for it. The other one, he worked hard and got it. Same house. It's a different process. So therefore, and I mean, this is really, when I read this first many years ago, it really struck me very deeply that Balaram Vidyabhushan says that the first class, just gross materialists, they're just animals, disguised as humans outwardly. The second class, he says, they are religious animals. Yeah. The Karma Kandiya, and in Christianity there's an element of Karma Kandiya, there's an element of liberation, mukti, salvation. In Islam, there's Mayavad, or some version of impersonal Mayavad, or something like that. Can't make a picture of God. It can't be done because he's beyond being pictured. And if you do picture him, then, they'll declare a jihad on you. I mean, seriously, actually. It's like an offense punishable by death. So, and they've got their Karma Kandiya thing. There's so many wealthy Muslims, and so there's a Karma Kandiya element somewhere in their picture. So, Karma Kandiya, or getting, what is religion? My religion means to get material things, mainly by the grace of God, means you, according to Balaram Vidyabhushan, you are a religious animal. And atato, you have to go beyond being a religious animal. Then, Brother Jigyas, then you can begin to understand Brahman, the absolute truth. And then you begin the actual process of understanding with Janma Yasya Yataha, the original source, the original origin of everything. Right, so you know, I mean, well, in the Adi Leela, where Lord Chaitanya meets Prakashananda Saraswati, that's the 7th chapter of Adi Leela. You know, I remember back, it was like 74, 75, Prabhupada, just before, a little while before he published the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada published Adi Leela 7th chapter as a book, as a separate book. Lord Chaitanya preaching to Prakashananda Saraswati, who was a Mayavadi. And we just read here how Prabhupada is, you know, in his way, Prabhupada has his way of expressing himself. I mean, he can make points so pointedly. Shankaracharya became a pseudo-gentleman. The thing is that it's commonly thought in Mayavadi circles that Vyas, his presentation of Harinam Vad, that the absolute truth is not transformed, but his energy is transformed. They take it to be a mistake. And if you go through, I mean, it's all a bit demanding on the brain, but if you go through that 7th chapter of Adi Leela, you'll see one of the arguments that Lord Chaitanya makes to Prakashananda Saraswati, that, you know, you shouldn't be a Mayavadi, you should be a personalist. One of the points he makes is that Vyasadeva does present that the absolute truth has a personal feature. And the way Lord Chaitanya puts it is, if you say Vyasadeva was wrong with that, then it undermines Vyasadeva's position completely. Then you can just say, you know, if that was a mistake, means he's a conditioned soul like us, so why should we listen to him at all? Yeah, but we shouldn't do that, because he's Vyasadeva. And Prakashananda Saraswati accepts that point when Lord Chaitanya presents it. It's interesting. But many Mayavadis don't accept that point. They accept, you know, this total transformation, Vivartavad. And so everything is Brahman. Not you've got, you know, Supreme Brahman, who's the Supreme Lord, and a lesser level of Brahman, or even other levels of Brahman. Are you with me? I don't suppose you're against me, but do you follow? I mean, there's all sorts of things. Like, you know, well, you don't know actually, probably, but the Mayavadis, they talk about that when Brahman is in illusion and Brahman thinks that the world is reality and that we exist, then that Brahman in that so-called personal state, first of all, is Jiva. But when Brahman becomes more advanced, Brahman becomes Ishvara. And Ishvara and Jiva are actually the same. Like, and Krishna, Vishnu, they're Ishvara Tattva. They're like living entities. You know, they're not living entities actually because they're just Brahman, but, you know, They're sort of like living entities, but they're very advanced. And they're almost at the point of realizing Brahman, that it's all one, and that they don't exist as individuals. That's Ishvara. Becomes Ishvara. And then finally Ishvara, when Ishvara becomes completely advanced, he stops being Ishvara and is just Brahman. Because that's all there is, Brahma Satya. There's nothing else, actually. So that's how they regard Krishna, as an almost realized soul. Very just that far away. And then he spoke Bhagavad Gita. So therefore Bhagavad Gita is useful, because it's almost on the level of Brahman realization, giving a glimpse into Brahman realization. Therefore Bhagavad Gita is good. They don't reject it. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comment or question? Shriketa Prabhu, any words of wisdom? Yes.
I wonder how the Bhagavans criticize us in their actions.
How they do? Oh, they criticize us.
We hear pointing out the faults in the Bhagavans in our classes.
Yes.
How they do in their classes.
You're wondering how they do. Okay, I can tell you a few things they do. They definitely say that, like with Prakashananda, with Lord Chaitanya, what are you doing all this chanting and dancing with the fanatics for? You should be with us sannyasis. Means, we're on a higher level and we're like on approaching Brahman. We're not like caught up in emotions like these people chanting and dancing, becoming emotional. They're on a lower level because they're emotional. They're dancing. It's all emotion. And, sannyas means you're approaching Brahman, you're coming to that point. You've left the jiva state behind. So he criticized Lord Chaitanya, Prakashananda Saraswati. It's all there. Adi Lila 7th chapter. That you shouldn't be doing it. You're a sannyasi. You should be here with us and having philosophical discussions, which means we're gradually adjusting our consciousness through philosophy to merging on the basis of philosophy. And they say things like, this prasadam they eat, gosh. In other words, they feel you should eat super austere. Shushu with no spices. Only. Nothing else. Nothing. Anyway, shushu tastes nice. But nothing that tastes too nice. Nothing that tastes too nice. And these clothes, particularly the women, look at their clothes. They keep hair. Wow, it's just mine. So therefore they do things like, in their places, women aren't allowed. Or if women are allowed, they put up a curtain. I mean, even some Vaishnava, not Gaudiya Vaishnava, but like the follows the Vallabhacharya, Pusti Marg, the Gujaratis. They have sannyasis, they have brahmacharis. And when they do programs with the sannyasis and brahmacharis present, they put up a screen, like a curtain, between the men and the women. Yeah. All these things are Maya. Shushu is Maya. Shame. Gropwa is Maya. Alu, that's Alu Sabji. It's all Maya. And things which have taste like real, taste like chili, sugar. Oh my God, it's dead. They say things like that. And this kirtan, well, I just mentioned, bhajan, deities. They worship deities, but not like we do, as like a real process of developing relationship. It's just for purification. Because the deity is taken to be Brahman, or close to it. It's in the Bhagavan, actually the Bhagavan feature, Jiva and Bhagavan. When we're living it, the Jiva becomes advanced, the Jiva becomes Bhagavan. Which doesn't mean Bhagavan, just means almost Brahman. So anything you can think of which is nice, which we do, they reject and they criticize. And like with Lord Chaitanya, they really didn't take him seriously. And so Lord Chaitanya, when they criticized him, Lord Chaitanya spoke the very famous half verse, Guru Vora Murkadeki Karilashasa. My Guru, he looked at me and he told me, Murkadeki, you're a fool. Karilashasa, and he chastised me. And he told me, you're not on that level. Where you just sit down and discuss Vedanta Sutra and like that, just chant. He told him. If you read the exchange between Lord Chaitanya and Keshava Bharati, then Lord Chaitanya asks him, not Keshava Bharati, who's Lord Chaitanya's guru is Ishwarpuri. When Ishwarpuri gave him initiation, Lord Chaitanya asked him, so what should I do now? Now I'm initiated. And Lord Chaitanya suggested, shall I now join the others, and discuss philosophy, impersonal, Vedanta Sutra? And Ishwarpuri said no. And he said, Hari Nam, Hari Nam, Hari Nam, Eva Kevalam. He spoke that verse. Just chant the holy names. And that's what Lord Chaitanya told Prakashananda Saraswati. He told me, you're a fool. You're not ready to get into such discussions. Just chant. Anyway, it's interesting that the discussion between Lord Chaitanya and Prakashananda Saraswati is presented in quite simple terms, but you can see the procedure, Lord Chaitanya's strategy, the sequence of the arguments he presents. And they all became devotees. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you for a wonderful class. Taking a quite extensive verse and breaking it down to really understand. I just wanted to find out, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a Mayavadi, yet he worshipped the deity of Lord Jagannath, and he was the head Pujari of Lord Jagannath.
Well, he wasn't there, Pujari, but he definitely worshipped Lord Jagannath.
Did he see Lord Jagannath as the person's, in that form, he worshipped him in the person's form? And is that worship still carrying on now in Jagannath Puri? Are they still that consciousness? Or are they involved?
Yeah. You know, I did mention how Chaitanya Charitamrita presents him like really quite as an impersonalist type. But Chaitanya Bhagavatam presents him in a somewhat different type of, way. Like he was somewhat of a devotee. So, but anyway, he did worship Lord Jagannath, and because at least, if we just take it from Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was in some sort of Mayavad way. If we take it as presented in Chaitanya Bhagavat, it sort of ends up at the same point, because he was definitely not a pure Vaishnava at best. He was definitely not. And Lord Chaitanya, he really presented things to him very strongly. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, there was definitely a major transformation in his character. Yeah. So, that's what I'd say about that. But, nowadays, certain strict Hindus don't accept the Jagannath temple as a Hindu temple. Certain very strict Hindus of certain sorts, because there are elements of other things in their worship. There are elements of other sort of practices in the worship of Lord Jagannath, of the Jagannath deities. Yeah. So, certain strict Hindus don't accept it as a Hindu temple and the deity as a Hindu deity, even though the vast majority do. And Jagannath's immensely popular amongst the Hindus. But they've definitely got some unusual, like just say, for example, the practice going on to this day of the Shabaras preparing Jagannath for Rath Yatra and bringing him out. They are pig eaters. Yeah, they actually are. So, from the strict Vaishnava perspective, from a strict Hindu perspective, that's not acceptable, because a strict Hindu perspective basically accepts caste, in terms of birth. So, it's a bit extraordinary. It's all a bit extraordinary. Jagannath Temple. But they still won't let me in. I tried once, 1979. Me and another devotee, we thought, no, they're not going to stop us. So we just walked up to the entrance, and they came out with big sticks, like really big sticks, couple of meters long. Yeah, and they confronted us. And we wouldn't listen. And Krsna Das Maharaj, if you remember him, he was with us. And he went to the temple office, the temple administration, and got on their cases like only Krsna Das Maharaj could do for not being proper Hindus. Wow! He just about blew them through the roof completely. Really, he was just screaming and screaming for a good hour or so. But they still wouldn't agree. Yeah. And therefore Prabhupada wouldn't go into the Jagannath temple. I mean, in his early days he did it before ISKCON. But after ISKCON was formed, Prabhupada wouldn't go and didn't go into the Jagannath temple. Hare Krishna. I think let's end here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.